Welcome back to Carolina Journal Radio. I'm Mitch Kokai. The Trump administration pulled the United States out of the Paris Climate Agreement, and Trump's Environmental Protection Agency has nixed the Clean Power Plan, which was sold as a way to help address climate change. So with those major changes in policy, is the world now on its way to overheating? Joining us to help answer the question is Dr. Patrick Michaels. He's director of the Center for the Study of Science at the Cato Institute. He's also a climatologist and the author of Lukewarming, the new climate science that changes everything. Welcome back to the program.
Hey, Mitch. Well, my answer to you is the world is on its way to lukewarming, which is what it's been doing for quite some time, which means it's not warming up all that much.
We hear quite a bit about the dangers of climate change and if the Trump administration makes these changes, we're going to be setting ourselves up for all kinds of problems in the future. Is there any truth to that?
Well, you can use the EPA's own model. It's called the Model for the Assessment of Greenhouse Gas-Induced Climate Change. And if the listeners are really clever, they'll realize the acronym for the model is MAGIC. And you can use the MAGIC model to see how much warming would be prevented if the United States dropped its emissions to zero and kept them there until the year 2100. And it's about 2 to 3/10 of a degree Celsius. Now that assumes an expected warming of over 3 degrees. That's wrong. It's not going to warm up that much because it's just not warming up that much. So the United States, yeah, we're a contributor, but on the flip side of this, absent any real attempt to reduce greenhouse gases and carbon dioxide, what nation on Earth has reduced its emissions more than any other?
I think I have a guess, but I'm going to let you answer.
The good old USA. And that's because we've been substituting natural gas for coal for power generation. Natural gas is now much more efficient with regard to the cost of power generation, and it produces about half as much carbon dioxide per unit energy that you get out of it. What's not to like?
And these changes were not necessarily made because of any desire to reduce emissions.
No, they were made because of the desire for good old profit. You can produce power cheaper. You can produce power cleaner. You don't have to scrub out sulfate and nitrogen oxides out of the plant because natural gas doesn't burn to that. Coal has all these residuals in it. So, yeah, it's just people wanted to outcompete other people in the power market.
So the changes in policy that have been put in place since Donald Trump entered the White House will have no noticeable impact on the climate?
Paris would have had no noticeable impact anyway. If every country on Earth does what they say they were going to do with Paris, and assuming more warming is forecast than is actually going to happen, the Paris Agreement would save around 2/10 of a degree C of warming globally. That's it. It doesn't do anything. And everybody knows it. And the only reason the Paris supporters claim that it would reduce emissions so much is they erroneously blame every last bit of warming since the Industrial Revolution on human beings. Everyone who studied this knows that's not so. That way they get an inflated savings figure. But really, the fact of the matter is we haven't warmed all that much.
We are chatting with Dr. Patrick Michaels at the Cato Institute, also the author of Lukewarming, the new climate science that changes everything. So we continue to hear, despite what you're just saying, that global warming or climate change, whichever term is used, is this long-term problem, and we're just avoiding dealing with it, and the United States is part of the problem. What's your response when people continue to make such a big deal about this?
The last scientific paper I presented, which was last month, to the Air and Waste Management Association, I showed that because we are going to be exporting so much natural gas, and because countries in which the air is really dirty, like China, are becoming affluent, and as they become affluent, the people demand environmental protection. What's going to happen is there's going to be a large switch away from coal for power generation globally. And if you start adding up all the numbers, you realize that by the year 2100, we are going to warm less than the Paris Agreement would allow. In other words, we're going to meet the Paris Agreement with or without the Paris Agreement. And Donald Trump was perfectly right in saying this is a bad deal for the United States. After all, we're reducing our emissions anyway, and we want to export this technology to the world. It's good for us.
And these changes you're alluding to are happening because of economic changes and not because of government mandates.
Absolutely. And I will tell you that I keep on hearing these arguments that, solar and wind are as cheap as fossil power. Well, they're not. If they were, people would be closing fossil power plants and putting in undependable wind. Wind doesn't blow all the time, but there are some places where wind power is good, like in North Texas where it blows all the time. And the sun doesn't shine all the time, so that power plant's not going to be real efficient either. The point of the matter is, if it were capable of competing with these other large, dense sources, it would be doing it, and it would be doing it without a push from the taxpayers.
One thing we often hear is about the consensus among scientists about global warming. You are a scientist and, in fact, a climatologist.
Correct.
Not just a scientist, but someone who actually has worked on these issues. What, if anything, is the real consensus about what's happening?
Oh, this is a great story. I hope we have enough time for this. It has been revealed that the climate models are all tuned, in other words, made to mimic the climate of the 20th century. This was not general knowledge. It came out in Science magazine, I guess about 9 or 10 months ago, and a big paper came out talking about model tuning, and that we don't even know what's been done to the models because the graduate students that work on these things don't take notes. But we do know this. Models are tuned to achieve what is called in this landmark paper an anticipated acceptable range of change. In other words, it's not the objective model that makes the forecast for global warming. It's the subjective modeler who decides what's right. I mean, go figure. We're going to base the world's energy policy? We're going to base people's lives on that? I hope not.
And so these are people who are basically have a reason to want to see some global warming who are building this into the model?
Of course. The problem is, if the first model group ever says it's going to warm 3 degrees and they have a lot of prestige, nobody's going to come out with a model that says it's only going to warm 1 degree. Oh, by the way, there are 105 climate models in the UN's latest report, and 104 of them are wrong. One of them has got it right, and it doesn't show very much warming at all. And, tell the special prosecutor because it's the Russian model.
Some sort of Russian collusion. So in the brief amount of time that we have left, if people hear continued commentary about the dangers of global warming, what do you want them to know?
Well, they're already turning it off. I mean, you can only tell people that the world's going to end so many times, and when they notice the sun keeps rising, they tend to discount these predictions. We've had like 3 big hurricanes in 1 year. Well, no big deal. We went, 12 years without a Category 3 crossing a U.S. coast. I mean, climate changes, climate stays the same, and the warming rate we're on will get us about 1.5, 1.6 degrees by the end of this century.
Well, one person who will certainly be monitoring the situation closely as our climate changes or doesn't is Dr. Patrick Michaels. He is the director of the Center for the Study of Science at the Cato Institute. He is also a climatologist and the author, as we mentioned, of Lukewarming, the new climate science that changes everything. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mitch.
And we'll have more on Carolina Journal Radio in just a moment.